hide your kids, lock the doors. You're listening to HR's most dangerous podcast. Chad Sowash and Joel Cheeseman are here to punch the recruiting industry right where it hurts. Complete with breaking news, brash opinion, and loads of snark. Buckle up, boys and girls. It's time for the Chad and Cheese Podcast.
Oh, yeah. It's Ben Bernanke's favorite podcast, a.k.a. the Chad and Cheese Podcast. I'm your co-host, Joel Cheeseman, joined as always, the Taylor Swift to my Travis Kelce. Chad Sowash is in the house. And as always, on this episode, we welcome Toby Dayton, CEO at LinkUp, a.k.a. the Bigfoot of big data, the Sasquatch of statistics. Toby, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
So mild-mannered.
Especially after this
I put all that energy in that, and I get I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Speaking of Taylor Swift, you guys watch the Grammys last night?
I watched some of it. Tracy Chapman, awesome. I got goosey bumps on that one. She looks great, sounded great, great song.
You teared up. You know,
it's a great song. Just because it takes all of us back. I'm sure.
Kind of a throwback.
Oh yeah.
It was a time when everything was hair, big sound, hard stuff, and then she came along with an acoustic guitar and just crushed it. So it was great to see her on stage again.
Well, I like to see it getting transferred over into the realm of country, right? I mean, it's just like it's such a great song. It can be just about anywhere in any genre. And
it has been picked up by a country western singer who was on
That's
stage
what I'm
with
saying.
her. Yeah, so yeah,
exactly.
it transcends all genres of music. Well, Toby, enough Grammy talk. Yes, Taylor Swift won her 4th album of the year, setting records. And Mariah Carey and Billy Joel and Stevie Wonder were back on stage as usual. But we're here to talk about economics and the jobs report. But before we get into it, let our listeners know about LinkUp and what you guys are doing and how you get this data.
Yeah, so LinkUp is the global leader in delivering job market data to the markets that we serve, and we've got a really unique data set in that we only source our labor demand data, job openings, directly from company websites. So it's a really unique data set, global. We're indexing millions and millions of job openings that are found only on company websites. So it's real-time data, it's accurate.
Junk.
And no job board pollution. So we've got really good predictive data around what's going on in the job market.
Job board pollution. Well, let's talk a little bit about what happened out there today, kids. So from the DOL, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, aka the BLS, reported that the American economy added 353,000 jobs in January, bringing the total jobs created under the current administration to 14.8 million. The unemployment rate held its steady, low rate at 3.7%. This continues a 2-year trend of the jobless rate under 4%. 2-year trend, the longest stretch in more than 50 years. Toby, this has got to be good news, my friend.
It is. It was definitely a blowout report, is kind of putting it mildly. It really was. It surprised everybody. Consensus was about 180,000 jobs, and sort of continued a little bit of downward trend, and just the job market was having none of that whatsoever. It was kind of a crazy report by every measure.
Well, it sounds like everybody's waiting for the next shoe to drop, and that, we're waiting just for everything to drop out of the economy. So month after month after month, we get these, even when we get big job numbers, we feel this kind of still negativity against the market. Is the shoe ever going to drop? That's the big question.
Yeah, and we'll get into that when we talk about predictions and sort of what we think is coming for the year ahead. But generally, I would say this report is pretty indicative of what we're seeing in the job market right now, which is just continued strength. And you look at that number on the right in the bars. We looked at trailing 90-day job gains, monthly job gains, and it just continues to move up. And we had a good numbers in our demand data in January. So you put all these together, it really is, the year is certainly off to a great start. Wages went up, job growth is up. There were some things that people tried to point to as, some of the skeptics in the world, and certainly the markets were caught by surprise here. So people were trying to dig deeply into the data to try to find some reasons to be unhappy about it, but there really wasn't much to find. I think January is, rightly so, a little bit of an anomaly. And we noted that in our forecast last week, but for the most part, there really wasn't much to find in the way of bad news for the report by any stretch, no matter how hard somebody was trying to dig for it.
There was one nugget that I thought was interesting. The largest jobs increase on the report was professional and business services, which added 74,000 jobs in February, well above 2023 monthly average of 14,000 jobs. 74,000 to the monthly average of 14,000. Meanwhile, healthcare, 70,000 jobs, and retail gained 45,000 jobs. We talked about last month how these two, the healthcare and retail, were really the bulk of the jobs. What is this business services side of the house? We're starting to see other areas grow. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you're right. I think that was one of the strengths of the report was the job gains were more broadly spread out across the economy than in the past couple of months, where there were really just only a handful of sectors that were seeing job gains. In this report, it really started to spread. Business services is a big one. Obviously, those are higher wage jobs, more white collar jobs, sort of flying in the face of what we've seen with some tech layoffs over sort of the end of last year. So that was a very good sign that there is some confidence that businesses have about what they expect this year. So that was very positive. Construction was another one, I think, that is very positive, that construction gains are up. So that is a huge sort of bolstering of what's going on and that's sort of the backdrop of the economy. Government is hiring. Leisure and hospitality, you're right, those are still picking up jobs. So it really is. There's this job market just has no signs of cracking at all.
Is it safe to say we should not expect a rate cut in March as previously predicted by a lot of people?
Yeah, that was really where the markets and everybody was sort of apoplectic about what was going on. And there is a lot of uncertainty on how fast and how rapidly the Fed was going to start cutting rates. And you're right before the report, it was, I think the odds and markets were sort of 50-50 on a rate cut in March. That dropped last week, just plummeted. And now Powell came out with his comments and said, it wasn't going to happen anyway. And May is now even in question. So there is sort of this, the uncertainty around what the Fed's going to do, what the markets are expecting, and what the job market is doing is really an interesting set of variables.
Are we at risk of an increase at this point? I mean, should we be putting that on the table or not?
Well, I'm not predicting what the Fed is going to do is something I tread into very, very carefully and cautiously. And, we always say with our data, there's sort of what the data, what the signal is, but the second part of that is what's the trade. And I tend to try to stick to the data and not the trade, because that is, that's fraught with a ton of risk. But having said that, I will say that certainly with this kind of the kind of numbers we saw for the for January jobs report, that does give a lot of credence to the higher for longer and the rates this year. And Powell's been very clear about it. He said, we're not in any hurry right now. The biggest mistake we can make is cutting too soon and having to raise again if inflation pops up. And you look at wage inflation in January, the numbers were, it's still coming down, but wages are still they're still up there, and that's great for a full employment environment that we're in. Job growth is steady. So I'm not sure I would go so far as to say rate increase, but it's definitely going to prolong how long rates stay where they
higher
are
for longer.
Let's talk about wage growth, because that's really big. ADP chief economist Neela Richardson said, quote, "You're seeing solid pay growth, not supercharged pay growth like we saw before," end quote. So your thoughts on why we're seeing continued pay growth, but it's not supercharged?
Yeah. Well, I think things are staying where they are. Wages tend to be really sticky. When they go up, they typically don't come back down. Unlike some other parts of inflation, things that we're seeing other volatility and inflation in other areas. But for wages, they tend to go up and stay up. So I think that there is a baseline there. I think the frothiness of what was going on in 22 and 23 is over. Quit rates are down. Job shifting is really become much more sort of at pre-pandemic levels. The wage inflation was always higher for people who changed jobs. I think it was up at 7-8% versus people who stayed in their jobs saw sort of 5 to 6%. So all the turmoil of the sort of post-pandemic era, people changing jobs, moving all around, remote work, all of that shifting, I think, had a really outsized impact on wage inflation. And things have now settled down into a very positive environment where there's more continuity and stability, but wages are above inflation. So real incomes are up, and it's really bolstering the economy. People are spending, people are traveling, people are doing the things that in a post-pandemic environment that they are now able to do. So it really bodes well. And I think, again, it's one of the benefits of being for the broader economy in this full employment environment where it's employers are going to have to stay pretty aggressive in maintaining people. And there's not a lot of slack in there in the job market. So employers are going to have to keep paying attention to keeping workers and paying them good market rates.
LinkUp is the leading provider of deep, accurate, and actionable labor market data. Unique in that we only get job listings from the one source of truth, the employer's website. By going to the source, we avoid all the duplicate and expired job listings that plague job boards and thereby other job data sets. Our data offers the clearest window into employers of all types and sizes throughout the world for an ever-growing number of use cases and applications.
It feels like the calming of inflation has stabilized a lot of things. Would I be correct in that? There's not a lot of like, hey, inflation's up 10%, I should get a 12% raise because of that. Like things have tempered. Right.
Exactly. Things have tempered. I think people are there still is some unhappiness around elevated prices, particularly at the grocery store seems to be the last sort of bastion of where people are getting really pissed off about what's going on when they check out, and that is causing some issues. So I think that is inflation generally has settled down. I think people are generally, consumer confidence is up. I think there was just a huge uptick in consumer confidence at the end of last year. It continues to go up as that inflation issue has subsided. I think it's still going to take a few months for people to get fully acclimated. I think that's another interesting thing about the year ahead is, what's the outlook? Is there going to finally be some alignment between what's actually going on in the economy and people's perspectives on what's going on in the economy? That had been a huge disconnect up until about the last month or two. I think that is coming into balance now.
I think he's saying my Pabst Blue Ribbon is not going to come down in price, is what he's saying.
Well, they're trying. Biden's out there trying to rip on the grocery chains for keeping prices elevated, and talk of sort of companies artificially keeping prices up there. So we'll see what happens there. But
Profit margins are still at record pace, and we're seeing countries like France, or at least companies like Carrefour in France, actually take things off the shelf because Pepsi is gouging the shit out of their products, right? So they're actually taking things off the shelf or putting notices up saying that the prices for materials haven't gone up for this product, but the price for this product has gone up. So, I mean, it's going to be it's an interesting balance. We need to take a look at real inflation, and then we've got this thing called greedflation that's happening that is in real overdrive right now.
Yeah, and early on in the pandemic, we were, sort of made the observation that employers, and it happens in any environment when demand is there, that companies and employers will tend to be, they'll raise wages as the last step in the process. They'll try everything else they can before they'll actually start raising wages to attract workers. Sort of the inverse is that they will hold on to high prices as long as they possibly can until they start to see.
Word is they're bringing back Pepsi Clear to make up for the losses that they're going to see in Europe.
That'll work. Let's talk full employment, shall we? Let's talk about full employment. Let's talk about chaos. What the hell's going on out there?
Yeah, so we put out some predictions for the year on what we're seeing. We every month we forecast non-farm payrolls. We look at our data. We've got a model. So this year, for the first time, actually, we decided that in addition to forecasting monthly job gains in the U.S., that we'd take a crack at looking out for the full year. So we tend to, our data is very predictive, sort of in terms of 1-2 months out in terms of job gains. Mm-hmm. I think when you look underneath it, there's a lot of trends and themes that we can see that give us a pretty good sense of what's going on in the job market. So we thought we'd put some statistics to against that and see how we stack up at the end of the year. So we are, basically at a high level, we really everything stems from our view that we are in and will be in a full employment environment for all of 2024. We don't see a recession anywhere on the horizon. Job market continues to be strong. I think unemployment is going to stay, under 4% all year. Wage inflation is going to be in that nice perfect range of 4 to 5%. Job growth is probably going to come down a little bit from where it's been, although I would take the over on our forecast of 1.6. Mm-hmm. But I think it's gonna be better than consensus forecast. The economists and the markets were predicting really muted job gains, under 1 million net gain of jobs this year. So 1.6 is about double that. So I think from a stats standpoint, we see a very, very healthy, solid job market. Nothing certain, not a crazy numbers like we've seen in the last couple of years, but just very strong, steady, resilient job market for the entire year.
Let's get to this bonus prediction real quick, Joel. I want to hear what is this? This is jarring all of us.
on the politics?
Yeah.
We both went right to that one. Wait, no Trump or Biden? Let's hear this.
I am, without getting into my own personal politics, will. That's based largely on what I think is an interesting aspect around an election year, is that sitting here in January, the time frame between now and November is eons. And when you look at, in both parties, the general grumpiness of the electorate with both nominees, and you look at polling, it is basically the whole country is completely really unexcited, is also underestimates understates the sort of state of
it's been a real boner killer this season.
So it is I think when you look at what's going on, I would not put any money on that prediction, but I think that lots.
So say more here. Does Trump go to jail? Does Biden say I'm going to step down for the good of the country? Like, do you have any predictions on how this unfolds?
I don't know that it doesn't necessarily go into specific predictions like that. But yes, when you look at all the factors that could potentially affect the tickets, those things are certainly come into play. And I think that a lot can happen between now and even the conventions. And we've never seen, I certainly in my lifetime have never seen a convention where there was anything but a rubber stamp on, after the primaries. It would be, I was, barely alive in the last time there was a convention where there was actually deal making going on around who was going to be on the ticket. So I don't know. It's a little bit of,
I think Nikki Haley probably agrees with you. I mean, the reason she's still kind of in it is like waiting for the worst possible scenario for Donald Trump, right?
Totally. I mean, you just sit there and hang on and see what happens. And there's a lot of uncertainty on both tickets. I mean, on both sides, both parties. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. Everybody is completely resigned to the fact that this is going to be and always has been the inevitable matchup.
Yeah.
It's very much just a contrarian pick, just sort of for fun. Again, I'm not sure.
Any thoughts on a third party candidate? I mean, RFK is polling 20+%, and depending on the age range, doing fairly well. That's a real wild card from where I sit.
Yeah, that's as scary as anything that I want to think about or talk about. Yes. But yeah, I hope that. I mean, I will say on a third party, it's too bad we don't have a viable third party in the country, and that we're really stuck in a two-party system. So I think I'd love to see that happen. I think the risk is always, as has been the case in the past, that all it does is disrupt the sort of two-party system, and it's really not viable today.
What other geopolitical issues do you think are most pressing, or maybe keep you up at night, or should be keeping some people up at night?
I think there is, generally speaking, I think beyond the sort of hard statistics and sort of what we're predicting in the numbers, I think the narrative backdrop and the risk factors for the year are really high. I think there's going to be just a ton of noise this year. The politics is certainly part of it. I think the uncertainty, there's just unbelievable amount of uncertainty, and that just sort of raises the decibel level of the gnashing of teeth, as we said in our blog post, sort of the chaos and din that's going on around this. I think certainly geopolitics, global geopolitics, you've got two wars, certainly a war in Europe and a potential increase in what's going on in the Middle East.
Yes.
That always brings some uncertainty. I think Washington, too, continues to be just massively dysfunctional. So there isn't going to be any help whatsoever coming out of Washington for, pretty much anything. But as it relates to the job market, helping create more liquidity in the job market, there will continue to be just no assistance whatsoever in solving some of these big macro issues that would help create a more liquid, efficient, and effective job market.
Yeah, if we know anything, Congress is going to get nothing done, and they're going to blame, the voters for making whatever happens in during this election cycle in next year. So it's all just wait and see kind of bullshit right now. Unfortunately,
Toby, one more for me. You mentioned recession, and the old adage of recession is when your neighbor loses their job, and depression is when you lose your job. The data point that really caught my eye recently was Meta's earnings and sort of Meta's stock price going through the roof. It went up 20% on Friday after earnings. And this is in large part due to the quote unquote year of efficiency, which Mark Zuckerberg has touted. If my numbers are right, they went from around 187,000 workers when they started the year of efficiency, and they're now down to about 167,000. Yeah. Do you think this is going to lead to a company saying, hey, shareholders saying, hey, if Facebook can do it, we should do it? And are we going to, I think we're going to see a lot of job losses in the tech sector, but I want to know your thoughts because you see this on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think there is. I would agree with you. I think we are going to see it. And it is, you're right. It has been largely isolated to this point. Sort of the big headlines are big tech companies that were just really crazily aggressive in their hiring coming out of the pandemic. And I think they are trimming back there. I think that is going to continue to happen. But those are the most in-demand people in the entire economy. So those will, anybody laid off from tech companies is going to get very quickly reabsorbed into the economy and into the market, getting picked up by other companies. So I don't see that layoffs are going to be a huge, those sort of big headline grabber layoff announcements, I think are going to be more part of the noise thing. I think what we will see, and this creates some of the gnashing of teeth that we were talking about earlier, I do think if rates stay higher for longer, there are going to be some impacts there as businesses who were really only able to survive and live, these sort of zombie companies that lived on really low, essentially free debt. I mean, free capital. Yeah. Those companies are going to find a really hard sledding as time goes on in a high interest rate environment. You've got real estate is another issue that is going to create some issues. So I do think there is going to be some turbulence in this environment. There are going to be some layoffs. There is going to be some efficiencies there. There's going to be some things that happen to companies that just can't survive in this market. So it is going to create some issues. I think then in the job market specifically too, you look at AI, you look at productivity and efficiency gains. Mm-hmm. There are going to be some things there that cause employers to be really pay attention to what their workforces are doing, how they maximize the returns on their human capital. And I think all of that is, again, going to be in some ways just a healthy continuation of some of those larger themes going on, underneath the hood in business and in the job market, certainly.
Well, unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, in the U.S., anybody can start a business. And a lot of these businesses, their business models haven't evolved, and they've been pushed, they've died, and they've been clinging on and still not changing business models. So as we see some of these companies, kind of go the way of the dodo, this is part of evolution. This is part of the market as a whole. If we don't change, we don't survive.
And
and it's been a pretty frothy, private equity and VC market, and those companies. I think there's going to be some cleaning out of those kinds of.
Well, speaking of money flowing and outflowing, there's a big game coming on. I know that we're all sports fans, and speaking of economic impact, we got the Super Bowl coming up this weekend.
There's an industry, by the way, sports betting, online gambling is an industry.
DraftKings is doing all right. DraftKings is all right. So all right. We made the Biden-Trump prediction, which we can't get better than that. That's really out there. But let's talk about the game. Who you got and what's the final score? Chad, who you got?
So very simple. I mean, any sport that you take a look at over a season, you take a look at momentum. Take a look at the Eagles' momentum. They started out high and they just plummeted the entire time. They got smashed. Then we watched the Kansas City Chiefs really stumble and bumble the entire year, and they got a lot of wins, don't get me wrong, but they didn't get them like they normally do. The big difference is they've got momentum going into this game, right? And I really feel like that the 49ers have a great team, but the problem is they don't have Mahomes, Kelsey, and Taylor Swift kids. So at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Kansas City. We're going to go – this is going to be a fun one because I see the defense is doing a good job here. 28-21, and that's going to go to Kansas City. Kansas City Chiefs.
Kansas City. All right, I'll go because Toby's our special guest as always. I'll let him finish this, but I'm gonna agree with most of that. I think it comes down to like, do I want to bet on Purdy or Mahomes? Yeah. And to me, that's like an easy. Mahomes is the best quarterback out there. Reed is a great coach, a little better, I think, on that end. Two great tight ends, two pretty good defenses. But at the end of the day, I think Mahomes is going to be the factor that brings it home. to Kansas City. I'm going to go 24-21 Chiefs in a solid game. Toby?
All right, sticking with the contrarian theme, I'm going Niners.
There we go.
It's mostly, I used to be good at betting with my brain instead of my heart. Now, as I've gotten older, I just completely throw that out the window. So I don't disagree with anything either of you said, but I do want the Niners to win. So I'm going Niners 30-24.
What's the X factor? What gets them over the Chiefs hump?
I don't know. It's their time.
McCaffrey.
I don't have any.
I think Kittle. If there's an argument for the Niners, I think Kittle looks at Kelsey and says, "You know what, dude? I'm just as good, if not better, and I'm going to ball out this game." I think Kittle gets like 2 touchdowns.
I think and defense does. There is a role there.
Yeah.
So, but yes. It's based on. Once the Vikings were out, I was just going straight to who I want to root for and cheer for.
Once the Vikings were out in September, I turned my attention elsewhere. Anyway.
All right.
Oh, Browns. All right, guys. That's another.
If somebody wants to find out more about this data, they want to be able to connect with you around not just the data, but also some of your predictions and whatnot. How can they connect with you?
The best place to go is our website, linkup.com. We publish our forecasts there. We've got our data, very good commentary on what's going on in the job market, and good ways to contact any of us if you're interested in our data.
Love it. Let the good times roll, baby. Chad, that is another one in the can. We out.
We out.
We out.
Thank you for listening to, what's it called? A podcast. The Chad, the Cheese. Brilliant. They talk about recruiting. They talk about technology. But most of all, they talk about nothing. Just a lot of shout-outs of people you don't even know. And yet you're listening. It's incredible. And not one word about cheese. Not one. Cheddar. Blue. Nacho, pepper jack, Swiss. So many cheeses and not one word. So weird. Anywho, be sure to subscribe today on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That way you won't miss an episode. And while you're at it, visit www.chadcheese.com. Just don't expect to find any recipes for grilled cheese. It's so weird. We out!